Hi, everybody. I'm Michael Lee. Welcome to Hudson Presents, Conversations with Contemporary Artists, a program brought to you guys by Hudson County Community College and the Cultural Affairs Director there, Michelle Vitale, who's in the top of the grid. So, Michelle, thank you. And also a thank you to Summer Dawn, our resident tech expert, who will be recording these talks and stitching them together so that they can be put on YouTube at the end of the semester. So thank you guys who are in the crowd for coming tonight. It's a real pleasure to do this, obviously, and it's a pleasure to have people out there who want to share a little bit of their Friday with us. Tonight we have the artist Esperanza Mayobre, whose name I'll probably continue to mispronounce for the rest of my life. But I'm really excited to have her here. I want to talk to her about, all kinds of things like, what she makes, why she makes it, how she got from Caracas to Brooklyn, and a bunch of other things. So stick around and we'll get into it in 2 seconds. Just want to let everybody know, if you have questions for us, for her, if you want, you could put them into the chat as you're thinking of them. And then towards the end, we will sort of open up the floor for Q&A. So you're welcome to either voice your questions or I'll pluck some from the chat. But again, thank you guys for coming, and please help me welcome Esperanza. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this artist lecture. I'm a fan of what you do, so thank you so much.
Right. So it looks like you're in your studio right now.
Yes, I am.
And the studio is what, in Brooklyn, correct?
Yeah, it's in Brooklyn and Bed-Stuy.
Okay.
Yeah,
and I know that we've talked a little bit about the situation that a lot of artists find themselves in, being, whether they do it consciously, purposefully, or they feel like they have been set upon the notion of post studio. You're not quite that, you still have like a workspace, and that's important. Although you've mentioned that a lot of the stuff that you make ends up being sort of ephemeral in nature, yeah?
Yes. Well, I mean, I'll eventually have to be, probably with the New York reality, will have to become a post-studio artist. And I'm totally fine with, it's very stressful at the beginning, but I kind of decided to change the narrative in my mind about that. And I decided to treat my studio as a residency and a temporary thing. And that meanwhile it lasts, it's great, because the reality of New York is that it changes. I don't think it's a new thing. I just think it changes more dramatically now. Like I was watching the Fran Lebowitz and Scorsese like Netflix thing, and it was like great, because it was like they talk about how the city is always changing, and that made me be a little bit more in peace with the reality of the city that I have to live. But for now, I lucked out, and after a lot of like missed luck, as any artist in New York, and I have a beautiful studio that I have no idea how long it can be. And the typical New York story, it can be 10 more years, or it can be 1 more year. I have no idea. So right now, I'm treating it as a residency and enjoying it.
Indeed. I think, there are a lot of artists in the crowd for all of these talks, but, anyone who's not, it really is strange how, the reality can differ hugely from sort of the myth of like having a place that like, you sort of like call a workspace for a long time. So I guess I'd like to know, even though you've told me a little bit about it, you've been in New York for a good long while, like over a decade, right?
Yes.
And before that, you were where?
I came to the United States. I'm from Caracas, Venezuela, and I came to the United States in 2000, kind of by chance, honestly. It's not like something that I really wanted to do or something.
Really? Huh.
Yeah, no, I was a cabinet maker and I kind of wanted to go to study in Denmark or Sweden to continue my studies in cabinet making. And I ended up here by random reasons, personal reasons. And then I was in Boston, and I was in Boston for 3 years. I went to school there at the museum school, which was the
Okay.
best school. It was great because education in Venezuela is very traditional, and having the opportunity to explore in the way that American universities allow you, especially the museum school, which it's not so much anymore, but it used to be a very kind of experimental school. It was amazing for me. So it's like one of the best gifts that life has given me is to study there.
Wow.
Um,
So I mean, it was a real sort of mental change for you that drove you to the museum school. They're like, okay, no more sort of like applied arts cabinet making. I'm going to go to the museum school to do something very different.
Actually, no, not really. It's
Oh,
like
wow.
I have, well, I have a past very different than what like the majority of people have. I really didn't want to be an artist. My mom.
Oh, tell me more. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I still don't want to be an artist, but I can't help it. My mom was an artist, and she wasn't. She was a housewife, whatever that means, and with all due respect to housewives, because that must. It's just another generation.
Someone's got to do the laundry, Esperanza.
Yes, and it was another generation and another expectations for women. It is a more so, but in the context, I didn't knew the artist struggle so much. If I would have known that, maybe I would have changed. But like, anyway, like the thing is that she was an artist, so I didn't want to be an artist. Also, art in Venezuela for me, coming from a country that there's so much inequality and so much different. I don't know. Art felt really bourgeois, and it felt like creating objects for rich people's houses, and I wasn't really interested in doing that. I valued the power of art, and I love art, but I just didn't want to be that person. So that's why I actually went into cabinet making, because I was more interested in kind of like the power of making useful things that can change societies. Also, that's where I grew up, in an impoverished society, and I didn't see art as how I see it right now, actually. And I didn't value art in the way how I value it right now. Also, you're like young and naive and you want to change the world and stuff like that. And then I came here, and it's by chance. I never even thought myself as an artist. Like, actually, I didn't even look for the museum school. Somebody else looked for it for me, and they were like,
Just
here.
led you by the hand. Yeah.
Totally. It's like totally that way. And the reason is because I wanted to continue my like cabinet making studies, and in Boston, the school that was there, the North Bennett School, basically was going to teach me what I already knew. So I obviously was interested in design. So I ended up totally there like by chance. But chance, you also provoke chance. So chance is more complicated. You accept chance. You accept the chance that you want. Chance
Yeah,
doesn't
I
get
would agree with that for sure.
Yeah, so that's
Um,
how I ended up. And then art is just fascinating because it's like a mind game. It's like, and it's the only thing that I haven't gotten bored of. It's like you can create answers and questions, and you create problems and solutions, and it's just so interesting and so absurd. So that absurdity has drawn me in and not let me go.
there was a quote that was uh, put onto the wall in whatever the lettering that was at the Robert Rauschenberg show at Pace from whatever 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I saw it, and it said something to that effect, like, you know, there's no reason why art shouldn't be sort of absurd, like it needs to be useless in
Yeah.
some way. And I thought that was very interesting. And what you just were saying about how you balked at the idea of like making art with a capital A because it was useless. Like you wanted to make something useful. But do you think after doing it all these years, you think of just that word and that idea of usefulness in a very different way?
Well, if I understand exactly, well, what I mean was useful is things that, I mean, when you come from a society and a country that's precarious and that doesn't have so much,
Yeah.
art feels like a luxury.
Yeah.
And also it's what I knew, like art wasn't actually, like contradictory enough, public art in Venezuela is amazing. It's like one of the most beautiful public arts that I've seen. So it does live in the street and it is for everybody. It's very democratic and it was part of like the politics of the 60s and modernists in Latin America and especially in Venezuela. It was very embedded with support. That's how like here, you know, like you can talk about abstract expressionists and Jackson Pollock and the government, like helping all of that movement going up. There's a big movement in Venezuela in the 60s of synthetic art and stuff like that. And there's an amazing public art. So I don't understand very well even why I have this idea that only art is only a bourgeois thing, because it was in the streets and it was for everyone. So I'm contradicting myself in a way, but in a way,
Thank you for being so candid.
I think contradiction is great. And I think confusion is great. And I think not knowing very well where you stand is great. It's because you're asking questions and you know, you're like just not being complacent with what's happening. And it's better to admit that. So, so in a way, it was this contradiction that like public art is amazing there, but at the same time, you know, art was for objects that were in wealthy people's houses. And I value art. I think art objects that were like in wealthy middle-class people's houses, whatever, like objects that were at my parents' house changed my life. That's why I'm an artist. So I do value the magical thing of like objects and how it can change one person's life. But that's not what I wanted to do when you like are surrounded by a city that's surrounded by shanty towns and you see poverty all around you. What you want to do is like useful things in the more like, I wanted to be more a designer, a cabinet maker, create things that were useful for people to have better lives. So that's basically what I mean. Once I came here to the United States, it was really interesting because all of that narrative change, because there's so much design here and there's so many objects and there's so many things. It's like the opposite. It's like coming from precarious to coming to abundance, and there's so much stuff here that I started rejecting things. And then I kind of understood the value of art and the values of art via ideas and the value of change via art. And then I couldn't get out of it. Then I had to go to my roots and try to be, you know, simple Freud and be like my mom.
So do you feel like, you know, some of those formative experiences that, you know, as unresolved as they might be, or contradictory, do you feel that like those things are still sort of what drives you to make a certain kind of work? Because the work you make now, it feels to me like when I've seen it, some of the bodies of work seem different, but they're not. I bet they're not as different to me as you might think they are to you. And it feels like there's this thread that runs through, and the thread is so obviously personal, but it is absolutely political as well. I mean, do you feel like you kind of owe that grain of like political quality to like the way back thoughts?
Actually, I'm really happy for what you just said, and that you can see the thread, and that you think that I don't find them so, that you were saying that maybe I find them like not similar. Actually, don't I see the thread, and I don't
Good.
find
Okay,
them
good. So
similar.
we both see the thing.
Yeah. But so I'm excited that you do too, because like I mean, it's like I understand my story. The question is, can other people understand my story? I understand what I'm trying to say. Well, kind of, but I see the thread, and no, I don't find it dissimilar. I find that the thing is that I use different medias and different ways of communication. In a way, I feel like I come from a place where storytelling is very important, and oral history, and in a very informal way. It's not like people are like doing things to tell you I'm doing oral history. You know, I come from a precarious society, so there's no money to like have the library of the oral history. You know, it's just oral history because everybody's always saying a story, and everybody is saying like some weird stuff, and everybody thinks what they're saying is really important. So I feel like I kind of bring that in a visual way. So for me, that's why I feel like I I love all medias. They're exciting, and it's exciting to work with your hands. But it's like depending on the idea that I have, I select the media. Also, I feel a slave was when, meaning like slave is not the word, but like it's very free to work in different medias because you don't have this like kind of how do you say, like I don't have to be good at it all the time. You're not always good. So when you change medias, you can free yourself, and you can say the story that you're wanting to say, but you don't have to be the best photographer, because in a way, I mean, I don't I don't I'm not the best photographer. I just use photography. You know, I'm not the best drawer. I just use drawing. And that frees you. And that also doesn't, it frees you. And I think it makes you, and it's funny because I come from a very craft oriented kind of education, but maybe that is my way of freeing myself of craft, because I feel like you have to be very careful of becoming that the most important thing is that your craft is okay, because then it's like, well, then sometimes I think you lose a little bit of like that kind of salsa or like, you know, spiciness of the story.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that's what you said. You said salsa. I love it.
Salsa is referring to music too.
I know what you mean, and I feel at times, you know, in my own work, and certainly people I've known, you will hear them say like, you know, I want to be in an active dialogue with history. You know, like it's a part of my practice that I am, you know, having these conversations, sometimes with, you know, people long since gone, but, you know, they take their practice like seriously, like they're sort of like sparring with, you know, historical figures, which is like, whoa, kind of crazy. And you sort of just stepped right around that and was just like unimportant, which I can imagine be very freeing. Maybe this would be a great time as far as visual storytelling goes. Why don't you share your screen and let's see some of those visuals.
Okay, let me bring it. 1 second. Enter full screen. Oh no, sorry. I have to do it first here, I think. Okay, hopefully I'll do it good, and bear with me. Okay. You see it?
I do.
Okay, perfect. And I'll go into my full screen. So that's interesting what you said about the weight of history. It's not like I don't have it. I feel painters are the media that have more than anybody the weight of history. I'm not a painter, so I don't have that weight of history. It's something that I respect and admire, and I'm so happy I'm not a painter in that way, because having the weight of history of like, I don't even have to name it, Jodo or whatever, like it's so much. So I think the freedom is a very important thing for me. So the freedom and the playfulness of like working in different medias and as a storytelling. So I'll start with this project, and I started with this image because this image is basically like, I feel like, well, from the conversation that we had previous to the talk, like in a way, like I'm an artist that has been living in the United States since 2000, but in a way my mind is always in my land and where I come from, and there's a longing. So this is an image it's a video, and it also exists as like a photo, and it's called But Not Darkness Was Here Yesterday. And basically it's a snowball that inside has an image of a beach that I grew up going to in Venezuela, in the south of Venezuela. And there is a big possibility that I'll never go again. It's a place called Golindano, and I love it very much, and I probably will never go again because of the political and economical situation. And maybe I will, but anyway, even if I go again, it will never be the same. And so it's like a poetic image for me about the longing that I have. And I used another beach. This beach, the snowball, it's put in the horizon of another beach that is in Florida. And I had the photographer Vince Contarino take the photo for me and the video. I was lucky about that. And anyway, it's a longing about like missing my own paradise, my paradise that doesn't exist. So in a way, it's like a beautiful image and a very sad one in a personal way. So I feel like I have constructed all my work around this. At the same time, in the next image that I'm going to show, this is a project that I did for like a project that a creative time used to have a long time ago, that was like to create sand castles. And when they invited me to do a sand castle, I mean, how silly can a sand castle be? And then I was working with the materiality anyway, but I decided to make like a raft that was called the Raft of Hope, in a way having also a reference to Delacroix and like many other things, but also was like, I work a lot with the narrative of immigration, and I've lived immigration in many different ways. When I came here as an immigrant, or I was as immigrant, I was somebody that came here to study in a school in Boston that had to end up staying and that can't go home. So my immigration has so many layers on me and also in society. Like when I arrived here, I was very proud of being from another country, and slowly the narrative of society made me feel very ashamed of being from another country. So it's a narrative that is super interesting. I'm not ashamed of being from another country, but I just feel that there was a rhetoric against immigration, or that you have to it was something. When I arrived, I was just from another country. It didn't mean anything. So anyway, I worked with this narrative. So I started with these two images because it has been basically the two narratives, like the longing of my country and like becoming to a new one, that has like created my work around. This work here is a series of work called Everybody Knows That Cities Are Built to Be Destroyed. And I started this series when I was a resident at the LMCC, the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council, and I had like a corner office of a Lehman Brothers office in 2008. And
So weird.
it was so weird. And it was
they don't need it anymore.
Yeah, no, it was fascinating, and it was amazing because my view was like this geometric paradise of all these lines. And I kind of like started doing the series of work and this like drawings. And in a way, at the beginning, there were poems to Caracas, the city that I started, but by having it in the context and in the walls of Lower Manhattan, people thought I was talking about 9/11 and about the cities, and that like, and it was the first time that my two worlds, like Caracas, the city that I grew up, and New York, the city that I live as an adult, like kind of converge. And it was super interesting for me because like chaos and order converge, my past and my present, like personal. It was there's so many layers that I can stop not talking. So I'm going to continue. And you please let me know if you want to say anything. So this is an image. This was at Jack Chainman Gallery. And I've been doing this series of works since like, I don't know, I started this in 2008 and still do the wall drawings. It's my favorite work to do, actually. They're like very meditative. And in this case, in this one, they go all around the wall. And I also have another element that I have some erasers that I just realized I didn't put it in the slide presentation, where I invite people. Well, I have a little box of erasers where people can come and erase, but you can't really erase them. But then this drawings, I'm very interested in ephemerality that you mentioned at a certain point. So these drawings that are going to be erased and that are on the wall and that they're ephemeral. I do prints of them in laser cutting, and this is just, I have like dozens of versions of this. This is just one of them. And they're permanent, and in a way they're like drawings of their poems to cities, and their poems for the most to Caracas. Cities are falling apart, and in a way they're kind of about construction and deconstruction. So with this longing and this ephemerality that is present in the other two projects, I also have this project here that is called Arco Minero, that it's about the gold in Venezuela. And it's like Arco Minero is called Amo, and this is a series that is called El Amo y el Esclavo in Spanish, which means in English, the master and the slave. And it's like, in a way, it's through my work and through my story, and by being Venezuelan, which is like being from a country that is falling apart, and I feel I can't do anything, nor if I live there, nor from afar, to change it. And that's a very sad feeling. So in a way, via my artwork, I try to make stories where I can talk about it. So by making the sculptures, I'm trying to bring to the attention to people that like are from other countries about what's happening in Venezuela. And it's all the Amazons, and there is like the natural resources are being like taken away. And it's really funny because in the rhetoric, well, it's not funny, it's tragicomic, and the rhetoric of Venezuela, that it's like very political and very like left wing and very about like you know, doing a government for everybody, and for the indigenous people, they're basically like deforestation and like ruining the Amazons and ruining our natural resources. And it's a rhetoric that now it's more talking about. But when I started doing this project in 2016, people were still pro the government, and it has been an interesting way how to talk about the root of the gold and a country falling apart. By doing this, I've been doing like, I have a body of work. I'm only going to show these two sculptures of like gold, and they're kind of talking about the ingots of gold. And in a way, they're like bricks, because a lot of it's also a commentary on NARC architecture. With this bodies of work, I create these drawings. I started doing these drawings. I use drawings normally as a train as a sculptor and as a cabinet maker. I use drawings at first, or when I started using drawings, were basically to make sketches for sculptures. The thing is that the drawings have taken over because of money and the New York reality, but also there's something beautiful about drawings. They're more simple, they're immediate, and they're gestures. And I like that about paper. And so I decided to do these drawings. This is image that I have that was actually for my recent solo show that I had at Trustall Gallery. And this name of this piece is called, I have it here, They Present as a Victory That Iranian Gasoline Now Arrives. So what I've been doing is that I've been documenting in the newspaper. I'm not that disciplined, but I try to be, and I read the newspaper like almost daily, but not always. Like, and I try to find things that are about the gold leaving Venezuela and the country and all of that stuff, and all of like the problems that are happening. So I create drawings. So they're like diaries in a way. And in this one here, it's like a detail of one of my drawings, and one of my texts is to give like some context. And we too have become runes in April 19, 2021, which was like in the middle of the pandemic. I read this, and actually it's an article that it's not about Venezuela, it's about Syria, but it's kind of how I think we feel right now, and in a way how I feel as a Venezuelan. So this have been like my marks and my ways how to talk about the problems of the country that I come from. Please feel free to ask me any questions if you feel I'm talking too much.
It just makes me think that, like when I look at a drawing like that, I think about all of the things that, both artists and just art appreciators alike would typically think like, what is a drawing supposed to do? But like all drawings are about ideas.
Yeah.
And I feel like, if you're not presented with something that looks sort of like corporeal, like it's a thing, it's like a drawing of a banana or a motorcycle. I do think about time and repetition and the act of making the drawing is something that most drawings like you don't think about. But in this one, that's like a lot of what I think about, like the time it's taking and like what you're thinking about and how, even the biggest, best, most expensive cities are always in the process of destroying themselves, even if they think about it in terms of like, you got to destroy the old stuff to make room for the new stuff. But I think everyone across the globe is starting to think differently about, longevity and like earth health in a big way. Anyway, blah, blah, blah.
But it's interesting what you're saying, because also cities are transforming themselves more fast than before. So everything is faster.
Yeah. And you have to wonder, like, how much of that is so that just developers can keep spinning their wheels, because developers develop. That's what they do. They don't need a reason to do it. They were put on this earth to develop. And I think about that as I walk. I was in Williamsburg earlier today, looking at a show by an artist, Todd Knopke. And I'm thinking of like this neighborhood that I used to know a lot. And now it feels like going into like a different planet. And it's because of it's the development that has happened. It's like, did it need to be developed? I doubt it. Not in the way that it did, but it did, because people whose job it is to develop spaces that were sort of like given carte blanche to do that. And yeah, it's definitely like a whole conversation, and it's, of course, it's problematic, not just for Caracas, not just for New York City, but like all over the world.
No, totally. And it's like and there's like money laundering, and the money laundering, it's so interesting. It's like such an interesting conversation. For me, it was just like when I started this project, it was like, the problems of Venezuela and the United States are very different. I mean, some are the same, whatever, but like in the big,
some are connected. Yeah.
Yes. So it's just interesting how like this modernist buildings and all this, yeah, I don't know. Well, that's a longer conversation, but yes. And this is like my most recent solo show, and then it was very interesting for me because like I started like doing the gold work, and in my drawings is a series that I've been doing since 2008 basically, but I love doing my wall drawings, and they grow in a different way, and I didn't think they would, but they merge in a totally organic way. And it was really interesting for me because like gold is so permanent and it's so heavy, and all of the my drawings are so ephemeral, and my gold work is so not ephemeral, that they would merge, and that they were in a way like talk about the problematic of a place. And I also believe in the power of art, of like trying to talk about problems in a very poetic way. Like I do not want to be literal. I am not a lawyer. I'm not an economist. I'm like, I don't know how to talk about the problems of my country in that way, but I want to talk them in the way of an artist. And when you're talking about like the weight of artists before, I tend to think a lot about like, for example, Malevich and other artists that like went, I mean, I'm not the first artist that comes from a complicated place, and that
Right.
has a dilemma about like, how can I be an artist when my whole society is falling apart? It's a dilemma. It's not easy. Like you wish you could be more useful, but you can't, because, and then you understand the power of art. And then it's, and even I don't know if I'm doing any change by this, but at least I'm making commentary and I'm trying to. At the same time, it's like I don't have the weight of history and the weight of like other artists, what they're doing, but I have the weight of like if it's becomes too important to do what you're doing, which at the same time, I don't think it has to be that important. It's art at the end of the day. I'm not saving anybody's life, which I think is the beauty of art. Maybe I'm saving mine, but I'm not saving anybody's else. So
Well, it makes me think of the I don't even know if you call it a joke, some sort of story about like Henri Matisse talks about like if the Louvre was on fire and there was a cat in the Louvre, like obviously he would save the cat, none of the paintings. I can't remember where I heard that, but like God knows it's completely apocryphal. But but it points to the fact that like art is venerated sometimes for maybe the wrong reasons, and it is made by people and it's made for people. I think, I hope, in the way that I mentioned that some people sort of like actively engage like the history of like as an example like the history of painting, or I should say Western painting. Um, was there a moment where you thought, I could spar with older sort of analogs of like political artists? I mean, especially like South American political artists, who, there are some very, very big names. Did you ever think like, what? No way. I've got to make work that's like totally personal first. And like you were just saying, it's like, I have to be political in this way because it's the only way I know how. Did you ever feel like you struggled with like trying to make art that was more overtly political and had to kind of pull back or pull more towards yourself? Or has that ever been a problem?
no, that never has been a problem. Like, I mean, if I could, I wouldn't do political work. And I try to do it in a way that it can be read as political or not. I'm
Mhm.
kind of happy when people read it as political. Like my gold work is very political, but for somebody that doesn't know the story of what I'm talking about or the narrative, doesn't necessarily have to see it that way. The wall drawings are very political, but I think it's it's very nice when there's that tension and that you don't have to necessarily like know the story. I can't help having the political. I don't think like all artists that were born in like Venezuela do political work. I don't think they have to either. I also, in my personal life, I come from a political family, like literally. that so it has been embedded on me and part of my who I am, and I can't escape out of that, out of like my own sensibility. I can't escape from the problems in Venezuela, like the poverty, like something that has affected me since I'm a little kid, all the social inequality and all of that. So but I'm not, one of the beauties of political art in Latin America, I feel, is that's not preachy. It's just like tries to point you things out. And that's what I try to do. But I've been trying to do that. Not, I mean, now I'm an older artist, so I know kind of, I understand more my process and my narrative, but I didn't when I started. And I was just doing it. And it
Well, I
was
think
kind
that's
of,
how it's supposed to work, right?
yeah. It kind of takes a little bit the magic when you understand. You're like, oh, boring. I know now.
Well, I mean, I guess the ideal place is that you come across more different kinds of magic, mature magic, when you get older. I mean, like there's certain things that I think, um, I mean, any younger person does, and of course that would also mean like a younger artist, right? Like things might, not to sound too cliche, but things mellow out. Maybe the message is less strident and more nuanced as you get older. But I don't know. And then some people get old and are just still big fangs. I don't know. Um, what I love about this one that you're showing now is that they're so tiny. They're little TVs.
Yeah, well, I'm really interested in things that like blend like everyone across, that are democratic, but not because of the idea of democracy or the concept of, but because of what really happens. I feel like, I mean, TV changed, and now TV is a computer, or our personal phones, but basically it's like a monument. This piece is called Monument to TV. And I was very interested. This piece is an old piece from 2008 or something like that. And it's like, but it's a piece that is like, it's like TVs are equalizers, and like really rich people and really poor people, everybody watches TV. I mean, except, I don't know, 1% of the population, but the majority of people watch TV. And I like this objects and these things where it's like a melting pot. And so I'm interested in objects like that, in situations like that, where like high and low, where popular and not, like all just converge without even knowing they're converging. I'm interested in that. And in the way of the TV is also, like, I feel like in the case of my country, in Venezuela, there's been a lot of like political control via TV, and now it's more common for people to have internet, but it didn't used to be. Internet was like a symbol of status, and it was only for like a few. So the TV, like, so sometimes I would be in Venezuela. Well, I remember I used to go to that town, the beach town that was in the first image, and I remember when there was the first TV that arrived, and it's a remote, like kind of fisherman, not wealthy town, and then it was like a big deal, and TV around, everybody around the TV. And now how, like, I would go to Venezuela and I would go to trips, and the narrative that you would see on TV was totally different from the reality that I knew. So anyway, the control that the state has done around TV in remote places, and the propaganda has been really interesting. And in that way, that's how this piece also comes across, because in that same landscape that I go to in southeast of Venezuela, there's like this sculptures, which I find them very Duchampian, and I'm like, oh, this Duchampian objects are in the middle of the tropics, are like TV antennas, and that are done with the most ingenious, popular, like, as intelligence, in my opinion. And they're like rustic fans that are just put in like very in poles, and they're, a lot of the times they're invisible because they're really tall, so you can totally pass through the landscape and not notice it. And this TVs work as good as any, this TV antennas work as good as any TV antenna, sophisticated, made by anybody. So I'm like fascinated by this popular ingenuity, and how it's like, in a way, at the same time I was doing a series with like NASA antennas and stuff like that, so that the two can juxtapose. And in that way, I have a archive of photographs of them. And oops, why it's not coming, the next one. Okay. And then I decided this is a solo show that I had in 2017 at the Westchester Community College. So I decided to also make like sculptures of my monument and my TV antennas that are like also monuments to the revolution. And with that, like, in a way, this piece here is like the kind of juxtapose all the ideas that I'm working on. And I wish in a way my work wasn't so political, or I don't think necessarily it has to be read as political, but like so political and so like centered in Venezuela. But it's my story and it's who I am. So I've been trying to make peace with that. And the first photo is a photo of like a oil negotiation between a secretary of oil and like somebody from like Saudi Arabia. And this here is like basket that are like the indigenous baskets are beautiful, and all my gold drawings are based on this like basketry. And the last here, like it's an envelope that says confidential. It's like economical matters. So in a way, it's like, I feel like this piece is like combines everything that I'm researching and my interest and what I've been working about. And to end on my like last two images is like, this is like that juxtaposition of who I am. And in the stories was this piece is called Tierra La Vista, Land Ho. And it's a peregrination that I did from the Statue of Liberty, and I end up in the United Nations to claim the flag of the immigrants. So,
wow, I love that it's a flag that doubles as a broom. I mean, that's really, I mean, you would not be the first person to have sort of like done work that's about like sort of like public displays of cleaning and like ritual. But you know, it's like, that's great. You know, I like that, you know, there's a history of this kind of work, and I think you did it really well.
Thank you. Well,
Wow.
I feel like sometimes the jobs that immigrants have are like the odd jobs, and that people want to be invisible. So when I was doing this piece, it was really interesting because nobody would look at me. And I'm like, how can people not look at me? I'm this weird person, like doing a performance, sweeping the broom with a flag, and I was invisible. Like
Well, that's
people
like
would
the New
not.
York law. Like the weirder you are, like the less people look. They're terrified.
Yeah, it was like the invisibility of it, and it didn't make sense, and the act didn't make sense. So it was like it was a commentary on like and like the odd jobs of society, that how they become invisible. And you know, and all this myth about, we all grow up with all this myth of the Statue of Liberty and the American dream. And once you become an immigrant, you kind of become like a person from no man's land, because you start becoming from nowhere. Because I can't, if I go back to my home country, I'm not from there anymore, but I'm never going to feel here. I'm from here. So it's like this contradiction that is actually enriching, and it's interesting, but it's hard. And so then I decided to go and claim myself at the United Nations, and claim the land of the immigrants. So it was my flag.
There you go. That's a really good place to sort of open it up for questions, if you don't mind.
Yes, of course.
If you want to unshare your screen, and
Yes,
hopefully
right on.
we've got oh, and here comes my cat. Ooh. I don't think she's going to pop up on the table. But so folks, if anyone has you know, it's not like it's such an enormous amphitheater. If anyone wants to throw out a question, I think we can have Summer just click on the, what am I trying to say? Unmute you, and you can just ask it in your own voice. Because I'm not seeing anything on the chat yet. But if you want to write it down, by all means, I'll be your voice. But if not, go ahead and hello, or Michelle, you can do it.
Hi.
Michelle, does that mean you have a question?
Yes. Yeah.
Fire away.
I don't know if it's a question or if it's more of maybe just like a feeling. But I just want to say that, one, I really loved how honest you are, and how there's not a lot of BS when you're talking. And it's just a really refreshing way to look at abstract work. And I really appreciated that. But I was thinking, I was like, how is she so strong to be so free? And then I started thinking, you know, you had said that you come from a political family. And so I thought maybe you're a political being, right? And then maybe these are vessels of that, you know, and just by you being here, that's political, right? Just by you existing is political. And then the works are a stream of that. You know, I think some people search for political works, you know, maybe it's an extension of something they experienced, but I think you really are breathing it and living it. And I really love that. And maybe I'm totally wrong, and I could be, you know, but I just wondered if you feel that way, that, you know, you talk about the life of an immigrant. And I think, you know, those are heroes. You know, we talk about everyday heroes, people who still believe in the American dream. You know, they make us believe. You know, that's why we work at Hudson County Community College, because so many of our students are they're trying to become, something that they dreamed, and so maybe that, I don't know if you have a response to that, but that's just what I was thinking while you were talking.
Thank you so much for what you said first than anything. I mean, I'll keep thinking about what you said and I'll probably email you later, but it's very nice. I mean, I feel like, well, the political thing, yes, I do come from, my grandparents, and my parent was an economist. They were economists. I actually started studying economy, but I wasn't meant to be.
Then straight to cabinet making. Okay, yeah.
Yes, my family was so happy. They were like, "Oh, finally, somebody practical in the family." They were very supportive, and I just feel like when you come, I mean, people have different sensibilities, and obviously, that was something that was nourished in my own household. Like it was very important, and I couldn't escape from it. I mean, I don't think all Venezuelans have that experience. I think you can have that experience also in New York. I mean, one of the most abrupt poverties I've encountered has been in New York. Actually, in the Bronx, in a place that I went to do a visit, I was like, I've never seen anything like that. I mean, I don't, like it's not like the experience of poverty and inequality is only in Venezuela, but it is. But in Venezuela, you can't escape. That's the difference. Here, if you want to, you can put the blind eye and you can act like it's not there. And I don't know, like I tried to be a cabinet maker and to do that. And then it's kind of fun and interesting to be a visual artist that can tell, a storyteller, and can kind of try to say stories that are political in that way, to see if you can affect things. But just, I don't know if I completely answered you, but it's kind of answered with another comment.
Yeah, no, I love it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I don't know if anybody else is out there who's trying to unmute themselves but can't. Hopefully that's not an issue. But I'm so used to being like in instructor mode. I want to call on people. I want to call on my dad to ask a question. But
folks can unmute, so you can absolutely call on your dad, Michael.
It's interesting to me how, what is how, oh, Pop has turned on his video.
Oh, about that.
Yeah. Dad, did you actually have a question, or are you just playing with the video?
Probably mostly the latter at this point. The questions would pertain to your cat.
Oh, well, we can save those for another.
Yeah.
Sort of, the Henri Matisse story about, fire, pets, and art. I liked, I saw that show at Trestle Gallery, and I was really caught with, maybe both, how long it takes you to do that. Because you're working from photographs, correct? And then you're tracing over the photographs pretty painstakingly, like very much like an architectural drafting. And of course, it's right on the wall. And so, when it's gone, it is gone.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the phrase is gee, you're sure brave, or wow, what a foolish thing to do, or this is perfect, because it shows a certain kind of, I guess, a conviction to an idea that's strong, because I got to tell you, I never do that. I spend a lot of time on my stuff, and my God, I would never make something that's like, well, there it goes.
No.
And I do think that means that you're built of different stuff than some of us. And that's an easy thing to do. Do you feel like the will to do something like that is somehow, like, I don't know, a manifestation of like that political mindset? Or is it just that's the way it works?
I think it's all of the above that you said, and that I also think I'm a masochist. But going
Okay,
on
now
the
we're
other,
getting somewhere. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. That's an honest question. But like, and in another way, you know, like you're an artist. We're all artists here. Like it's kind of like there's an intuitive, there's intuition. So I
Mhm.
think the first wall drawing that I made, I just did it. You know, like you just, you know, like irrational. I love when irrationality trumps rationality. So it was just like an act of like I just did it. I can't explain you very well why. I wasn't like I was. I mean, I can invent you a story, but I'm not going to do that. But the reality is that there's something. Then anyway, when I started doing the wall drawings, there was the beautiful. It is exciting to draw. I used to be more a sculptor, and like do like stuff with wood, and I'm trained as a cabinet maker and stuff like that. And then it started to be a burden. Also, my personal life changed, and I kind of didn't want to have things. I kind of wanted to be light in the world, and at the same time, I kind of wanted to do things with the simplicity of a pencil
Mhm.
and the
Yeah.
wall. So that's also that maybe is a conscious decision of this. But then there's something beautiful about the wall and the drawing. And I think I mean, you can see my influences. The weight of history is there, like the obvious ones. And one of them is Sol LeWitt. And I feel like Sol LeWitt wall drawings, the first time I saw them at Dia, I cried. I literally cried. And there's something so beautiful about the ephemerality of them. So I think unconsciously, I was like, I mean, because when I was doing this, I wasn't completely thinking about Sol LeWitt, but I think I was. Um, and then there's something beautiful of things that are not permanent. And it is hard, it is sad, but it's like, it is also a relief that you don't have to live with them in the world. And I know commercially, it's like committing suicide, and that it's kind of masochist and dumb to be doing wall drawings that are going to be erased, but there's something very poetic about it, and it's also healing, and I love doing them, honestly. So the only thing I need is people to want to give me the space to do the wall drawings, because I'll do the time. They're very meditative, they're fun to do, and I know they like, and when I can do them on paper, but it's not the same. There's something beautiful of something that is gonna go away. And yeah, so it's more out of the poetry of like the impermeability and like the inexistence and infinity than anything else. But
Yeah.
it started with intuition more than a political idea.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, it makes me think of also the one of the last pieces you showed with the photograph, the basket, and the envelope. It wouldn't be the same piece if it wasn't all found sculpture, basically. You know, because a photograph, I think most people know a photograph that they purchase at a flea market is as much an object as it is an image, you know, because you're thinking about it as like this thing. And it sort of like has the absolute opposite quality, but it has the totally same effect as what you're saying about the drawings. Like the drawings seemed like to have to be in that way. You know, it has to be that media, it has to be that substrate, in the same way that, like, you know, using gold bricks. And I love how, like, you know, like when they call an ingot like a brick, you know, sort of like for slang, but you're using real bricks. And it's not, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's not real gold, right? Like those aren't gold leafed. It's just gold paint.
It is gold leaf.
Oh, it is
But
gold leaf.
it's cheap gold leaf. It's not like the one that I can afford.
Oh, sure.
But it is.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it just, you know, like a brick, you know, thick as a brick, as the phrase goes, right? I mean, I kind of like how they're just stacked, And again, like, not everybody, I mean, like my dad doesn't know the history of like minimalist art, but I don't think he needs to, because I think everyone understands what a brick is. Bricks make walls. And that's kind of like the beauty of using such a direct object, a simple object, and like a really direct approach. Yeah. So I'll let you have the last few words here, because we should wrap up and let these good people get on to their dinner and their cocktails.
Well, thank you everybody for joining me for happy hour. I hope you had a cocktail here. Thank you so much, Mike, for inviting me. I'm like it was an honor when you invited me, and thank you everybody that is here, seeing some familiar, not
Yeah,
faces,
you're very welcome.
black, but face names, and I appreciate it. It has been very nice to talk to you.
Yeah. And just quickly, for anybody who would like to know, any sort of projects bubbling, brewing for the next, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 months that people can be looking for? Or are you working on something that you're going to unveil sooner than later?
No, I'm working. I mean, I have a show next year, and I'm working on some small projects here and there. Not, but like I'll unveil it. Follow me. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, very good.
Actually, I'm enjoying very much this pandemic has been very hard, but one of the nice things is that I've been able to concentrate in the solitude of my studio and to do more work than I would normally be doing, because there's less distractions. So that's basically where I am at right now.
Very good. Yeah, Esperanza, thank you so much for wanting to do this. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, likewise.
So again, thank you to Summer, who is just about out the door to the 14C Art Fair in Jersey City. And thank you to Michelle. And of course, the august institution that is Hudson County Community College. It's really great to be able to do this for the school, and to continue something that honestly would not have been a reality without, unfortunately, a pandemic, but also the brainchild of Michelle. So hats off to her. Again, thank you guys for coming. Thanks, Dad, and Vince and Joseph and James and Aya and Lori, Alyssa, and everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. And if you see the art fair, let me know how you felt about it. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody. Bye, Esperanza. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.